Welcome, everybody, into another week recap. We're recapping week 16 in the NFL, previewing the future games for Christmas and the holidays as well. Talking about Christmas movies and the holiday special of the Brickyard. Bring your stockings and all your candy. We're here to recap every game around the NFL and end it with the best gift of all. That's right, the worst top five to end the show. You're not going to want to miss it here. We had some great games this week, and we were treated to begin the week with Chargers and Broncos. Game where the Broncos win, they're in. If the Chargers win, better chance of them making the dance. Chargers and Broncos came down to the last few minutes. What a game in SoFi Stadium.
Yeah, no, it was a great game in SoFi Stadium. And there's a lot of implications on the line here, and it was really the implications I wanted to see in this game was the Broncos go up, and then what is Justin Herbert gonna do? Because we've seen Justin Herbert in big moments. We know the guy can put up big numbers. We know he has a big arm here. We know has a sneaky ability to run the football. But what we need to start seeing from Justin Herbert is just those signature come from behind wins against divisional opponents. And it feels like the Chargers all season have just kind of been like tempering. Like they've been like ramping it up little by little by little, and they've been getting better every single week. Jim Harbaugh had a health scare, and now he's back in the saddle here. And then Justin Herbert in this game, I texted you, I'm like, okay, Justin Herbert's down. The Broncos are winning in this game. I want to see what's going to happen next. I want to see what Justin Herbert's going to do. And what he did was we finally saw a game, national television, where he came through in the clutch. They were falling behind to the Broncos. Broncos had a sizable lead, and they were able to move the ball up and down the field, at least in the first half. And the Chargers ended up flipping the script on them. Broncos really couldn't do much in the second half either. And then we saw the Chargers have a breakout second half where you're jumping over the Denver Broncos. You're really dampering their playoff hopes. And now the Broncos are in a weird situation where they have to win against Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. And now that's how you have to get into the playoffs here. And we saw the Cardinals, and we kind of predicted how they would go out here. We thought this was a possibility to happen with the Chargers, but it looks like the team that it may happen for is Bo Nix and the Broncos, because you compared him to Mac Jones. You're like, I think he's Mac Jones, but a little bit better. And I feel like that reigns accurate where you have a good team, but when Bo Nix so far this season has really had to come up with it these past few games, the Broncos really haven't had an answer to score here, where the Chargers, this gives me hope where they're heading into the playoffs. They could potentially be the 6th seed, play up against, we might get another Harbaugh Bowl, or you might get a rematch with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Steelers, Joey Porter Jr. has a calf injury. They may be limping into the playoffs a little bit. George Pickens is now banged up. So you could see a scenario now where the Chargers are setting themselves up with a lot of momentum heading into the playoffs. You get the Patriots again here, and you get a little bit of a break at the end of the year where the Broncos just tough now. Now that you lose this game to the Chargers, your season, you may have just lost your season that week. Now you have to go up against Joe Burrow, who wants to win MVP because he has the best numbers of any quarterback in the league. And then, Kansas City, will they rest some starters? Yes, but does that mean they want to just let their divisional opponent, team that they see twice a year that you have bad blood with, does that mean you want to let this team walk into the playoffs? No, you don't. Patrick Mahomes, he wants to go up against the Joe Burrows. He wants to prove himself against Lamar Jackson. He wants to prove himself again versus Josh Allen here. So it's like, I can't see a scenario where the Kansas City Chiefs are like, yeah, even though it's our divisional rival, let's just let them walk into the playoffs here, because you look at their defense and it's not as vulnerable as Cincinnati.
Yeah, this game, either one of these teams who falls in this game was looking a lot worse for the playoff picture. And now that the Broncos lose, at least if the Chargers would have lost this game, they have the Patriots and Raiders that they're going to face off against. And probably by that last week 18, once when they have that spot in the playoffs, they're probably going to be resting starters. So this is a massive opportunity that the Broncos missed out on. They were up 21-14 at one point. They were in control. And then the Chargers came back. And I think that, the Chargers, a little bit here, I think to a lesser extent, is one of those teams that have always been perpetually cursed. And they're exercising some demons. This is a game where the Chargers fell behind. It's much more like the Chargers to blow these playoff implication games and fall out of the playoffs. Infamously, the number one offense and number one defense missing the playoffs because of their special teams. So I feel like the Harbaugh era, although I don't think they've completely eradicated their demons, I think that they're a team that is capable of eradicating their demons. Justin Herbert, he's had his moments in his career where he's played excellent and he's gone toe to toe with the Mahomes of the world, but he hasn't really had a big win like this. This is a game that puts them someone in the driver's seat for a playoff position, a guy who some people want to anoint as a top 5 quarterback, but at least no worse than a top 10. But in my mind, in your mind, I assume as well, I still have that blemish of that 27-0 blown lead that they had, and that's still in my head. So I think this season I see the Chargers kind of shaking that off a little bit. Lad McConkey's been a huge hit for them. Gus Edwards had a good game in this game. And then on the other side, the Broncos, this is a team that I think is still trending in the right direction when it comes to just their overall franchise. And Bo Nix made some decent throws in this game, but at the end of the day, he hasn't proven to me that when it matters most, he's going to make that big play. He made some pretty ugly plays in the fourth quarter that could have ended a lot worse than they did. And I think that he's still, he's a rookie. Maybe he'll shake those out, but I'm still not overly impressed. I think at this point, he's probably not going to win that Offensive Rookie of the Year. But great win for the Chargers and for the Broncos. Now having to face two of the best quarterbacks in the league, it's looking like you guys might miss out on the dance after it's all said and done.
I hope so. I mean, I would rather see Miami in there, if we're being honest, because Tyreek Hill in the playoffs, and then like Tua at this point, it feels like he's gone full Miami. Like ever since that hit, he's a little crazier now. I like the bleached hair. It's just a little off, but it's like a good vibe. He like gives you someone like he gives you like kind of like a D'Angelo Russell vibe now, or like one of those funny NBA players where like Tua, okay, like he's kind of been funny to watch over the past few weeks, and it's like interesting where it's like the Broncos, it's like you're ahead of schedule right now. You just cut Russell Wilson, you have Sean Payton, and you took a massive leap forward, and that's okay if you miss out on the playoffs, because honestly, the Broncos aren't supposed to be in the playoffs this year. You know who's supposed to be in the playoffs? The Cincinnati Bengals. Now, it's going to be the real question of pride for the Kansas City Chiefs is you're pretty much guaranteed to get the 1 seed at this point, because the Steelers, my God, you go from the Eagles, then you go to the Ravens, then you go to Kansas City, and then you have Cincinnati 4 weeks in a row. I mean, this team is going to be limping into the playoffs here, and then the Chiefs are going to get them on a short week after just losing to their division rival here, and then the Chiefs can knock the Steelers into the wild card realm, and if they win, I believe they would clinch the 1 seed, because mathematically they would only lose one more game. The Bills aren't getting the number 1 seed, so it will be the Arrowhead Invitational. So it's just the question, is Kansas City going to lose on purpose to Denver because they don't want to see Joe Burrow? Or do you say, Buffalo's riding high coming into the playoffs. They're going to be feeling themselves a little bit. How hilarious would it be if we matched up the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen with Joe Burrow? And the Buffalo Bills, it's not like they've been playing a lot of defense either. They just got in a dogfight with the New England Patriots where Drake May looked better than Josh Allen. You just got in a dogfight with Jared Goff. You just got in a dogfight with Matthew Stafford. So then you have the best quarterback and the best wide receiver coming into Buffalo. If you're Kansas City, would you rather send your division rival home and then match up Burrow, or would you rather just avoid the possibility of seeing Cincinnati? Because if they win, then they're going to have all the momentum going into Arrowhead, and they've kind of been your nemesis. And are you trying to avoid them?
I feel like they're a better matchup for the Broncos. Like the Broncos, that's a beatable team. But I'm also looking at the NFL standpoint. Like the NFL is going to benefit from Joe Burrow being in the playoffs. No offense to Bo Nix, but he is not the star that any of these other teams that are vying for the playoff spot are going to be. Even Tua. Tua would be fine, and hell, even Anthony Richardson would be better than having Bo Nix in the playoffs.
JT too.
Yeah, JT, exactly. JT had a monster game this week. But, like, who wants to see the Broncos in the playoffs who isn't from Colorado? Like, Sean Payton, I could care less if he's in the playoffs. And Bo Nix, like, again, when we previewed them we had them winning 2 games. Like, they're not supposed to be here. The fact that they're 9-6 and could make the playoffs is already great. Like, good for them. But seeing Joe Burrow against Josh Allen and seeing Lamar against the Steelers or CJ Stroud, like, this is what the NFL playoffs are about. We're talking about legacy. What is Bo Nix? What is he going to prove in the playoffs? Nothing.
Yeah.
He's going to prove that maybe he was the most successful rookie this year, but he's not going to beat anybody in the playoffs. Maybe you beat the Texans, but you're not going to even face the Texans. Maybe it's the Steelers, but you're not going to beat the Steelers. So I don't think we want to see the Broncos there. So I like Joe Burrow here. And then I like the Chargers making it. All these are better storylines than the Broncos. The Broncos just don't make any interesting storyline whatsoever for the AFC at all.
Yeah, and it's like your best chance was to beat the Chargers, and it gets harder from here. But yeah, I think it's on Kansas City. Is Kansas City going to rest their starters here? But like also, the thing is too, like Carson Wentz is going to be playing for a job if he's starting. And like Carson Wentz is no slouch either. So do I think Carson Wentz can beat the Broncos? Absolutely he can. And I would rather see Carson Wentz in the playoffs over Bo Nix at this point. Because if the Bengals make it, we would have Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes.
Does it get any better than that? It doesn't
No
get any better
brainer.
than that.
Yeah, it'd get better than that if CJ Stroud remembered how to play football because, we watched Houston and Kansas City. You had the Texans. You're like, think the Texans have a little bit more to play for. I thought Kansas City did because if they win this game, they would essentially lock up the 1 seed because all they need to do is win one more game here, and they would pretty much have it locked up over Buffalo. And then they came out. The Texans were actually pretty frisky in the first half, but when your entire offense relies on Joe Mixon and Nico Collins and you don't have an offensive line, it's going to be a problem. And then a lot of people have been like, what's wrong with CJ Stroud this season? What's wrong with the Texans offensive line? It's like, okay, have you ever seen how easy it is to walk through a door that's unlocked? Like, have you ever opened a door? It's just unlocked there. You walk through, you're like, oh, wow, that was easy to open that door. That's what the Texans' offensive line is like. You just walk right through. There's no protection for CJ Stroud. As soon as the ball is hiked, he's literally ducking. Immediately. He's flinching in the pocket. He's seeing ghosts right now, and they're not helping him out in the pass game. We're not getting any fast, quick passes out of the gate. We're still trying to push the ball down the field. We can't get a run game going because we're relying on Joe Mixon. Yeah, it works great in September. Joe Mixon looked phenomenal. Looked like a top 5 running back in the league. He was suddenly the favorite to win fantasy MVP in all of these leagues in September. But when we get to December and you're relying on a running back who is just let go from the Bengals, like, yeah, there was a reason why they didn't want him, and his name was Chase Brown. I mean, Zach Moss has played well for the Bengals this season. I feel like you should have kept someone like him on your team. And now Tank Dell is hurt. Stephon Diggs is out. CJ Stroud hasn't really looked like himself. And your defense played well in this game, but this game just felt like one of those games where it's like Kansas City kind of was just in the zone, and then Houston just can't do anything on offense, and it really does come down to their offensive line. When CJ Stroud is immediately flinching when he gets the ball, like, I don't understand what he's supposed to do. Not everyone can manipulate the defense like Tom Brady. Not everyone is as strong and resilient as Joe Burrow and Andrew Luck as far as elusivity. Like, CJ Stroud's like, he can run, he's elusive, but he's not as much of a big guy like a Roethlisberger or a Burrow where they can just kind of shake a defender off. Like CJ Stroud, like, he's just not that kind of quarterback.
Yeah, and honestly, you know what this game proved to me? I keep saying that the Chiefs are due for a loss, and maybe they do lose one more game before the season's over, but, like, I don't want to fall into this trap again. They face the Steelers and Broncos. They're probably going to beat them both, and they're going to be 16-1. But at the end of the day, another thing I'm not betting on is if Patrick Mahomes is hurt, he could even have they could literally sever his leg off, and I'm not going to bet against him. Because if he's playing that game, he's going to play electric. In this game, the stats are fine. Like, the stats show that he played a good game, but his game was even better. He looked amazing in this game. We got to see Hollywood Brown finally, which I think is completely unfair that Hollywood Brown is just going to come back with 3 games left to go in the season. Now they have DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce. All these people who have been fucking crying about how their offense has been playing. Oh my God, the Kansas City offense has played so bad at 14-1. A team who literally hasn't lost a home game this year. Or better yet, has won 16 consecutive one-score games, which is an NFL record. Enough with the Chiefs. Whether or not they lose another game, it does not matter. This team, at worst, is going to be in the AFC title game, most likely. I don't think there's any other team that's going to come in their way, even if it's the Bengals or the Bills or the Ravens or the Steelers. They're the Patriots dynasty of the 2000s, and now we have the Chiefs offense of the 2020s. They just cannot be stopped. Nothing can stop them. Taylor Swift is on their side. They have black magic voodoo. Nothing is going to stop the Chiefs at this point until Patrick Mahomes is 85 years old. Unfortunately,
I mean, you're forgetting about the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, how could you say at this point that the Chiefs are better than the Buffalo Bills? I mean, you must be crazy. Even when Josh Allen throws an interception, it's not an interception, it's a punt. Those don't
it's an
actually
arm
count. Oh,
punt.
wait, they do count on the stat sheet. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs, like, we've been saying this all season, like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And in fact, they have a better record than they did last year. So what actually are you talking about? The Kansas City Chiefs looked worse last season than they have this season, and then all season long, what have I been saying? Like, Hollywood Brown's gonna come back. Hollywood Brown, he's not the best receiver in the world, but the guy did have 18 catches in a game one time in Arizona. The guy was a really solid receiver with Lamar Jackson. And, he's kind of like a poor man's Zay Flowers. But hey, if you're a poor man's Zay Flowers, that's a really good spot to be in the NFL. And he's just another guy who adds a touchdown. He's gone. Just another speedster with Kansas City, which is what they've done with Patrick Mahomes. And then D-Hop, he's gonna turn back the clock in one of these playoff games. I'm telling you, he's one of my favorite receivers I've watched. And when you see these veteran receivers get with someone like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, someone like a Ben Roethlisberger here, someone who's just a legend, like, sometimes they just go off and they're gonna go out in the biggest moments, especially with his big play and, jump ball ability. I feel like he's going to come up huge for this Kansas City Chiefs team. And then you still have kind of Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and then you also have Samaje Perine. So you still have two really good backs out of the backfield. It's like Kansas City is better this year than they were last season. Maybe, sure, is their secondary a little bit worse? A little bit. But they're going to have a bye now. Patrick Mahomes is going to get healthier. DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a week of rest. Pacheco is going to have a week of rest. Like, I really don't see anyone getting in their way. And I think we're lining up for the divisional round to be Bills and Ravens. Guess what? They're going to beat the absolute living shit out of each other for the right to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. Because whoever comes out of that game, they're like, this is our one shot. This is our chance. It feels like it's Lamar Jackson's best chance to win a Super Bowl. Feels like it's Josh Allen's best chance to win a Super Bowl. But by the time you get to Kansas City, how healthy are you going to be? Like, you both need the bye more than Kansas City. Kansas City got bored last season. They're like, okay, what have we not done? Well, we haven't gone on the road to win a Super Bowl. That would be fun. Let's see what that's like. And then they did it. They went to Buffalo and they went to Baltimore. But now it's going back their Arrowhead. And the only team to win there, New England, Tom Brady, Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. And then both top two quarterbacks when they play.
Plus, don't you think that if they face the Bills and they're 16-1 and the only loss this year was against the Bills, you don't think that that's going to be a game where they pull out all the stops? Like, it sounds silly, I bet, but 16-1 team, a team that's literally one loss from being undefeated at this point, even with all their voodoo magic, like, this team, when they face the Bills, a team that they already own in the playoffs, they beat them 3 straight times. Like, I just don't think there's any team that's going to get in their way. And especially, like, if you look at Mahomes' stats the last couple of games, too, everyone was saying how he's been a bottom 10 quarterback, which was a dog shit take. But now he's starting to come around and start playing good football. This game, yeah, sure, he didn't have multiple touchdowns, but he ran around a little bit. He threw for 260. He completed 65% of his throws. So the Chiefs they're a different beast. We're not dealing with these really good teams. We're dealing with this all-time great team at this point. Even their defense has been good as well.
Yeah, Mahomes does this thing in the playoffs too that he doesn't do in the regular season, which is run. I feel
Yeah.
like every playoff game, like he doesn't really run in the regular season. He'll do it, but he's good about not getting hit. Usually when he gets injured, it's in the pocket, but like every playoff game that's close with Kansas City, what breaks it open? Like, oh yeah, we forgot Patrick Mahomes can run. And that's usually what happens. And like I know people don't want to see them win, but I wouldn't mind seeing them pull off the three-peat here, to be honest. Like you're
They've earned
watching
it.
let's not do to Patrick Mahomes like what we've done to some other like players here, what we did to Brady, what we did to even Manning to a certain respect. It's like it is so rare to see an NFL team this good. Like, you know how hard it is to get back to the Super Bowl? People like, oh, it's rigged. It's like, okay, why didn't they rig it for anyone else then? Like the Steelers like got to 4 Super Bowls and 1 with Terry Bradshaw. That's ridiculously hard. Joe Montana. But like the fact that he's already gonna be there and he's still in his prime, he's still getting better. With
He's 28. He's 28 years
yeah,
old.
he's not even 30 yet, and he could potentially have 4 Super Bowls before 30. And then we're looking at okay, realistically, this guy could finish with 8.
He could. And not only that, you look at all of his playoff rounds, right? He's never not made it to the AFC title game. He's had the greatest player of all time that he's lost to in the AFC title game on an offsides call, by the way. That could have
Yeah.
changed the projection of that game. And then the Bengals game, which was a 3-point game that could have gone either way. And then in the Super Bowl, yeah, I mean, Super Bowl, he lost to Brady fair and square. But otherwise, he's had one of the most dominant runs of not just the NFL, but just sports over the last 20 years. And every time somebody's great, like to this level of greatness, whether it would be a Steph or LeBron or those other examples, they're starting to do it with Shohei Ohtani in baseball. They just hate on this player as if he's like the villain. It's like, no, he's the reason why we're tuning in. We want to see who's going to be his successor, who's going to beat this guy. And right now, like, the closest thing is maybe the Ravens with Lamar and what we saw against the Ravens and the Steelers in this past game. They're the closest thing, though, because who else is going to beat them? We have our questions with the Bills' defense. The Steelers' offense can be inconsistent. Closest thing is maybe the Ravens and Lamar.
Yeah. I feel like there's one guy. I feel like the Bills are like the one team that Pat Mahomes never wants to lose to in the playoffs. I feel like that's the one team that would make him sick to lose to. I feel like that's the team that he gets the angriest in the regular season when they lose to them. Like remember last year, he went full LeBron, Patrick Beverly, handing the ref the camera. Like okay, like I see it. But
Yeah, I mean, that's
talked
his
about
best
the
friend.
Chiefs a lot.
Yeah, that's his best
But I feel
friend.
like it's deserved. Not a lot of people have talked about them this season, but they deserve praise. Like they've only lost 1 game. It's ridiculous, and they're the best team in the league.
And they're smart. I mean, plugging in Carson Steele off the bench out of nowhere and making him as effective as he was, they're the smartest team right now. They're above everybody else. But maybe the closest team I mentioned earlier, the Ravens. We saw Ravens and Steelers on Saturday as well. And Lamar, everyone's painting him out of this MVP race. It seems like the media is really pushing for the Josh Allen MVP. And Josh Allen's had a great season, don't get me wrong, but Lamar properly inserts himself back into this MVP conversation and says, wait a minute, my stats are the best in the NFL. I have over 40 touchdowns, 3 picks, one of only 4 players in NFL history, and all the other players who did it won the MVP that year. His QBR, if the season ended today, would be the highest QBR in NFL history. He's 5th in passing, 2nd in touchdowns. He's also rushed for 700 yards, almost 800. Why not Lamar? Lamar beating his demons at the Steelers who have been the house of horrors for him. He wins out, plays a good game. Good for Lamar.
Yeah, no, he plays a good game. The fact that he could finish with the highest QBR of any quarterback ever is absolutely ridiculous. And if he loses, this is going to be the equivalent of like the Jokic versus Joel Embiid MVP, where just the media is trying to find any excuse they can to give it to him. I'm not saying Allen's kind of whining his way to MVP, but like the media is doing all of the talking for him here. And then you have stories coming out like his non-throwing hand is broken this season. And then you have like, oh, I was numb throughout the second of the game. But Lamar Jackson balling out this season, having his best year, throwing the football, rushing for almost, he's probably going to finish with around 850 rushing yards, might have finished top 5 in passing, over 40 touchdowns. So you're looking at a guy who's going to have roughly 45 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, because the rest of their games are going to matter here. So the fact that he's going to finish that high, and then the only other quarterbacks to do that in NFL history, one of them's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers pretty much won every single MVP. And, the reason why he's probably not in the conversation as much is because he's not at the top of his division, but he went out there and beat Pittsburgh, and he plays in a much harder division, and his schedule has been harder this year than Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen has played in the AFC East. He got Tua for half a game, and then he got Tua right after he came back here. Then he gets the privilege of playing the New York Jets and the New England Patriots twice as well, who have been a complete disaster this year. And then, when you faced off against Lamar Jackson, that should be like the part of the conversation. Well, what happened when these guys played head to head? Because we don't always see that in the MVP conversation. Like, oh yeah, you only scored 10 points and then you only scored 17 versus the Houston Texans. Like, that should matter. Like, head to head matchup should matter. And I get people like, oh, his record's a little bit better here, but like, okay, if we're gonna point to record then with what he's doing this season, please tell me the game that Jared Goff only threw for 150 passing yards this season. Like, please show me that game for Jared Goff where Jared Goff only put up 10 points this year. Like, show me that game from Jared Goff where he let his team down that much, because everyone on his defense got hurt this season. David Montgomery went down this season. He had an injury on his offensive line this week. And then he goes out there, pretty much, his 2 best defenders in Aiden Hutchinson and Zaloni are out there, goes head to head, and now is a fake punt his fault versus Buffalo, which could have potentially cost them the game. Like, no, but they're still the number 1 seed in their conference. They're still going to have the best year. Oh, wait, they already have had their best season ever in Detroit Lions history. So you're going to have 2 players that are making history. Like, what history is Josh Allen making this season? Like, please tell me.
Individual games, I suppose, but I'm looking at both of their numbers side by side. This is Lamar and Josh Allen. So Lamar has not had a QBR under 100 outside of the Steelers game since week 2. And otherwise, he's thrown for multiple touchdowns in pretty much every game. He's only thrown 4 picks all season, including a game against Pittsburgh this week. And then on the ground, I mean, he's just been I just feel like he's had less stinker games. The Raiders game you can point to, okay, that was a stinker. The first Steelers game, okay, that was a stinker. Let's look at Josh Allen's. This fucking Patriots game, why was it a 3-point game against the Patriots? And why did you complete half of your passes? That was a bad game. And then we look at the Kansas City game, where his QBR was 83. And then the Colts game, he completed under 60% of his passes through 2 picks and 0 touchdowns in a win, by the way. And then we have the Texans game, where he was 9 of 30. And then the Ravens game, where it was basically the same stat line as the Patriots game this week. 0 touchdowns, 0 picks, half of his passes completed. So we're talking about not 1, but like 5 stinker games for Josh Allen. And I feel like the only reason why they're putting him at MVP, and again, I'm a guy who thinks that Josh Allen's had a great season. They're putting him at MVP because he hasn't won an MVP. If Lamar Jackson has never won an MVP and Josh Allen's never won an MVP, Lamar Jackson's the MVP this year. But the problem is they have to basically politicize this MVP and say, well, Lamar Jackson's won 2, so we can't give him another one. Why not? Because in baseball, it's the stats. And that's the one thing, maybe the only thing that baseball does right, is MVP. Oh, Shohei Ohtani, he's got the best numbers, he's winning. Barry Bonds won fucking 7 MVPs back in the day. Lamar Jackson has the best stats, he should be the winner. We shouldn't care if he's going to win his 3rd MVP. He's a guy that deserves to win 3 MVPs. He's been the 2nd best quarterback in the league since he's came into the league. Arguably. Maybe you can argue Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, but that's it. Nobody else is in the conversation at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just Joe Burrow who's in the conversation because he's made a Super Bowl here, and he's actually got it done in the playoffs versus Kansas City, which is something only Brady has done, but it's like, with this too, it's like this is like the toughest opponent that he's gone up against here, where you're playing in a division where you have one of the best coaches of the decade in Mike Tomlin. You're playing in a division with the 2-time Coach of the Year winner, and then you're playing in a division with arguably the second best quarterback in the league. And then you have to look at just like the iconic battles that Lamar Jackson has had to have this season. 2 games where he had to put up 40 points to beat the Bengals. Like 2 of them, and he won both of them. He didn't be like, "Oh, well, he tried in one of them," but like, no, he was down 10 points in the 4th quarter in both of those games, and he came back and beat the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, those are 2 really tough games, and then he has like 1 bad game versus the Raiders, the Steelers, and Philadelphia here. And, his defense also isn't as good as Buffalo's. Like, it hasn't been as good all season here. And honestly, like, Saquon is about to break Eric Dickerson's record. I think he's the most valuable addition for Philadelphia. And honestly, I would also put Jared Goff right up there. It's like, for me, it's like with what they've accomplished historically, like you can point to 3 different things with the Lions being the 1 seed. And last year, you want to argue like, oh, well, you shouldn't have given it to Lamar. Like, okay, well, that was last year. You shouldn't have. And if you did give it to someone else, it should have been Tyreek Hill. Like, that's the person who was the most valuable player for their team last year. You take the Tyreek Hill off the Dolphins, and they missed the playoffs. And he's a wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I don't think Lamar should be punished. Last year, I don't think he was deserving of MVP. You could have given it to Christian McCaffrey. You could have given it to Tyreek Hill, like you mentioned. That's the voters' fault. And why are the voters going to make the same mistake this year because of a mistake they made last year? At the end of the day, he's been the best quarterback. He's on one of the best teams. Why not give it to him? It's ridiculous. And I'm so sick of this MVP conversation, simply for the fact that it should go down to the best player at the end of the day. And Lamar Jackson has been the best player. He's really only had, like we mentioned, 2 bad games. And it's against the Steelers defense. Hell, even the Eagles game, he didn't even have a bad game necessarily, but maybe for Lamar standards. And then the Raiders game, like, okay, whatever. But overall, he's been the best quarterback all season long. And it wasn't until Josh Allen went Superman for 3 games that he was even in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, no, I don't understand why, like, Josh Allen goes Superman for like a couple games and he's in the conversation, but like Jared Goff, like, can't even get a mention. I don't understand. Like, he's consistently like, they've had the best offense in the NFL. He's consistently been leading. Like, the worst game he had all year, he threw 5 interceptions. And guess what? He kept firing in the second half, and he brought his team back, and they ended up winning on Sunday Night Football against a very good Houston Texans defense. And then suddenly, like, because he threw 5 interceptions, like, he's the reason why they almost lost the game. It's like, but then, if he went 9 for 30 and lost the game, that wouldn't have any effect at all. Like, I don't understand like why he can't get a mention. They're the number 1 seed in the NFC, and they had their best season ever. No mention?
Yeah, and I'm looking at Jared Goff stats, and this is a guy where he had a bad game against the Bucks, and he had a bad game against the Texans. That's it. In those 2 games, other than that, I mean, the Colts game, he didn't score any touchdowns, but he was still effective. He's still completing 70% of his passes. There was also a period of time this season where he completed 85% of his passes for like the month of October. I'm looking at the Seahawks game, the Vikings game, and the Cowboys game, where he had 10 incompletions and 10 touchdowns for Jared Goff. So I think Jared Goff deserves this conversation. Again, when it comes down to this, it comes down to narratives. And is Jared Goff going to be in the MVP? No, because in their mind, they still think of the Rams' Jared Goff, who scored 3 points in the Super Bowl, and they casted him as this outcast, went to Detroit, and they can't stand to admit that in Detroit, Jared Goff has been excellent. He's been a top 10 quarterback. You can rank him higher than top 10 if you want. You can put him in top 7 or 8 if you want, but he's been excellent, and media doesn't want to admit that.
Yeah, it just feels like there's such an agenda behind it. It's like you can't even mention someone else, or you can't even mention anyone else. It's like, oh, even when he throws an interception, it's not a pick. It's a punt.
An arm punt. And Dan Orlovsky, you want to talk about a fucking doorknob. saying that that's the right play. Like as if Dan Orlovsky knows what good football is. He was the same guy that ran out of the end zone, the same guy that was on the 0-16 Lions, the same guy that won one game in his entire career. This guy doesn't know what winning football is. I don't want to hear it from Dan Orlovsky.
Dude farts on national television, too.
And he's the same guy that's going to be hosting the fucking Simpsons Bowl when they did the Simpsons cast. Like, I don't want to hear it from this guy. I'm sick of these fucking people who, by the way, Dan Orlovsky, 2-10 as a starter in his career. So, what the fuck does he know about winning football? He has no idea what he's talking about. Ran
10
out
more
of the end
losses than
zone.
me.
What's that?
10 more losses than me. I didn't lose 10 games in the NFL.
That's
Sheesh.
true. The Brickyard, we've never lost a game in the NFL. This guy has lost 10. Therefore, he should not be talking about football. Another reason why you follow the Brickyard.
Yeah, never lost.
But you know who has lost? The New York
The Jets.
Giants. No,
The Giants, too.
Good pick. You want to talk about a team that I can now say is tanking successfully because they've played so badly all year long that they are now the number 1 overall pick. Poor Shedeur Sanders. I pray for his existence. They get crushed by the Falcons. We saw Bijan have a great game. The Giants' offense. Drew Lock. Stop. First of all, I bitched about Tim Boyle. There was no Tim Boyle sighting. And then they punished me with Drew Lock. It seems like no matter what I do, no matter how I complain about the Giants, they just find a way to punish me. I say, please don't show me Tim Boyle ever again. So they're like, okay, here's Drew Lock. I'm like, fuck. Please don't ever show me Drew Lock again. Now what's going to happen? Who are they going to show out now? Are they going to bring out the Deshaun Kaisers of the world? Who's next in this gauntlet of quarterbacks at the Giants position? It's crazy to think that they had stability, ironically enough, with Daniel Jones. He wasn't very good, but at least you had a consistently bad quarterback. Here, you don't have the consistency. You just have a new bad quarterback every week. It's the carousel of bad quarterbacks for the Giants, whether it's Tommy DeVito or Drew Luck. And now we saw Tim Boyle last week. I bitched and moaned. They heard the noise. Now we don't see Tim Boyle anymore. But it makes me think, who's next? There's 2 more games of the season. Do we see another Giants quarterback shit their pants on national television for a measly $1 million paycheck? That's the question.
I feel like it. I feel like, the Giants' heart grew 3 sizes over this Christmas season. They're like, we want to ensure we get the number 1 Christmas season, number 1 pick this Christmas season. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go out there. We're going to give big old Nate P a call. Nate Peterman coming at you live for the New York Giants. And he's going to be the starting quarterback. And for me, my only question is, what the hell happened to Tyrod Taylor? Because last season, Tyrod Taylor looked pretty good. If it wasn't for the doctors in San Diego trying to kill this man, he would have been a solid starter. I mean, he got to the playoffs with the Buffalo Bills. He has the same amount of playoff appearances as Justin Herbert does. And then we can't get a Tyrod Taylor sighting, even though he looked like the best quarterback for the Giants last season. But they're like, no, let's recycle all of this garbage here for the New York Giants. And thank you, Raiders, for winning versus the Jaguars. You decided to go from the number 1 pick to the number 6 pick. Good luck. Now you're going to talk yourself into drafting Quinn Ewers. Give me a break. So you can thank the Raiders. Now the Giants are going to have the number 1 pick. But now I'm
going to hold my rage for the Raiders for later today. Stay tuned for the end of the show.
You will hold your rage. The worst top 5 because they're bad at being bad.
It kills me for a team that literally all they needed to do was suck, which is so easy for them because they've been so bad all season, and yet they couldn't suck enough. The Jaguars, a team that tried to be competitive entering the season, a team that could benefit from a win. Maybe Doug Peterson won't be holding a cardboard box outside of Trevor Bank Stadium. Instead, they couldn't help themselves. They said, no, my pride and my ego getting in the way of things. I sound like Mike Ehrmantraut, but all they needed to do was suck. But them and their ego and their pride. Antonio Pierce looking for a second job after he's inevitably fired from the Raiders. He just couldn't help himself. He says, I have to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars with Mac Jones. Like, I can't fathom a world where we lose this game. You guys, all you needed to do was just lose. But instead, you went from the number 1 pick to all the way down to number 6. That is cataclysmic, dare I say. How does it get worse than that? You had potentially a Shador Sanders or a Cam Ward. And now we're looking at fucking Quinn Ewers or Jalen Milroe, potentially. Like, this is cataclysmic. And I was talking so high about the Raiders. I'm like, yes, they're doing such a good job doing bad. And then they do this. And then make me look like a fool. So shame on you, Raiders.
Shame on you, Raiders. But yeah, the Giants, who will they roll out? We'll see. But yeah, the Raiders are bad at being bad, but it's tough to suck versus the Jacksonville Jaguars when they're starting Mac Jones. Like, it really is here. And then for Atlanta, quick point here, Michael Penix, very Teddy Bridgewater vibes, if I must say so myself. Like, kind of reminded me similar. He'll probably be better, a little bit more athletic, has some more pocket awareness, but watching Michael Penix, it was like that same feeling when someone realizes you don't have an iPhone and the whole room gasps. It's like the same exact thing when you watch a quarterback play and you realize he's a lefty. You're like, it looks wrong. I don't know what it is, but when a quarterback is lefty, like, the camera's always on the wrong angle. The camera crew can't figure out the right side to be on. You can't figure out, like, he's a lefty. So now we should go the other side so we don't have to see his back the entire time. So we can actually see him bouncing around, looking through his progressions. Like, no, he's a lefty. You don't get to see that. You get the worst angle possible. What happened to the Madden view? Like, bring that camera angle back. But Michael Penix played pretty well in this game. Nothing mind-blowing, but I thought he was a solid starter for the Atlanta Falcons. Did he look like he gave them an energy infusion? A little bit. Had some nice throws to Drake London. Had some nice footwork here, some nice misdirection, getting a few balls down the field here to Darnell Mooney and getting some balls to Ray McLeod. So I thought his pocket presence was really good in this one.
Yeah, and he only threw 1 ball to the defense, which was about 3 less than what we were seeing from Kirk Cousins on a daily basis. So I definitely give him an energy infusion. We saw Bijan have a great game. He was getting the ball to his playmakers, so credit to him. I can't quite put my finger on my thoughts on him quite yet. I need to see a couple more games, but definitely think the Falcons are in a better spot with Michael Penix than without, and I do want to see him face a real team and not the New Jersey Giants at this point. But It is interesting to see that we have a first-round pick, left-handed Michael quarterback with the Falcons again. It's been a long time since we've seen that. It's been almost 20 years since we've seen a left-handed Michael mobile Falcons quarterback, but here we are, back again. Yeah. Hopefully he's not in the dogs.
Yeah, hopefully he's not in the dogs. And, with the Falcons, there's a scenario where they make the playoffs and some team may just not have enough tape on them. So you're like, damn, if you're Minnesota, you're expecting Kirk Cousins in the first round. You go up against the Atlanta Falcons. If their defense can pull it together a little bit, and then you go up against Michael Penix, where you only have 3 games of tape on him, so you don't necessarily know what is going to come at you. If they win 3 games in a row, Tampa Bay losing to Dallas, I believe they have the same record right now, so Atlanta is in the playoff picture right now. If they stay the course, like, you're likely going to face Minnesota, and then Minnesota could, like, theoretically go up against the guy where it's like, we just don't have enough tape on him. We don't know his strengths. We don't know his weaknesses. And then suddenly Raheem Morris looks like a genius, where it went from your season's in the tank here with Kirk Cousins. We're going to owe Kirk Cousins $90 million if he decides to get cut and then retire. We'll owe him $90 million in incentives here. And then suddenly you have a rookie quarterback getting his feet wet in the next 2 games here. And then you're Minnesota and you're like, oh, we still have Sam Darnold here at quarterback. This may be a bad situation.
That's possible. I think right now they're in the division lead now after this game.
Yeah, they are.
Because they have the tiebreaker.
They won both games.
Yeah, so they have the tiebreaker. So right now, despite how bad they played for like this last month, this would be something. They dragged him through the mud when they drafted Michael Penix. And I think there's reasons to doubt it, but now if Michael Penix can be, even I think a Teddy Bridgewater, if your comparison is accurate, that's still better than what Kirk Cousins was being. Kirk Cousins played horribly the last month. So, like, if he can be a Teddy Bridgewater, I would say a Vikings Teddy Bridgewater, that's a team with the defense and their weapons around them. Bijan Robinson runs all over that defense. They can win a playoff game, depending on who they match
Big
up with.
Teddy should have beat the Legion of Boom. That kick, we all remember that kick because
That
we
was
were
like the
all rooting for the
27-yarder,
Seahawks
right?
in that game. Yeah, that was like the extra point that their kicker missed, and then they were gonna win, beat Seattle, and I think Seattle's next game was that horrendous Packers Seahawks game after that. And then also have to correct one thing. You said he threw the ball to the defense in this game. No, he threw the ball to Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts
Yeah.
decided to juggle the ball and then hand it to the defender. There was no throwing the ball to the defense in this game. It was Kyle Pitts. How the fuck are you this incredibly incompetent for someone who's drafted over Jamar Chase? It looked like Kyle Pitts was like, I saw what the Cincinnati Bengals defense just did trying to get an interception. Wouldn't it be great if I could do that entire scenario myself and just juggle the ball and throw it to a defender in the end zone?
I think it's safe to say now, because it just seems like the NFL media doesn't want to admit this, or at least sections of this fan base. Kyle Pitts is a massive bust. Massive, massive bust. I mean, you want to talk about tight ends that were drafted early, right? I think of like Noah Fant. Noah Fant's a better tight end than Kyle Pitts at this point. We talk about TJ Hawkinson. TJ Hawkinson's been a great tight end so far. And there's other examples. Brock Bowers has been a success. But Kyle Pitts, talk about a cataclysmic, because not only could they have had Jamar Chase, but they could have had Jalen Waddle. They could have had Devontae Smith, who I think was also in that draft. Wide receivers for galore. Instead, they drafted a tight end who was built like a fullback. Not even. He's built like a safety, but not even a good safety. He's just small. For a guy who's supposed to be a tight end, if you think of a tight end, you think of George Kittle, you think of Travis Kelce. Instead, he's built like a slot receiver, and not even a good slot receiver. Kyle Pitts, massive, massive bust at this point.
Yeah, no, he's like Zion Williamson without talent.
It's like Zion Williamson if you put the fork down, basically. It's bad.
Yeah.
He's a bust, and he's trash. But enough about this Falcons and Giants game. Let's talk about another game that meant something, kind of. Browns, Bengals. Bengals win their fourth straight game. We saw Joe Burrow, 250, 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase got loose for 1. But my beef in this game comes down to benching Jameis Winston for self-proclaimed DTR needs CPR, a name that I'll give you credit for naming because it's actually a good nickname. But you get all of the Jameisisms that you hate, all the interceptions and the goofy plays, but without all the Jameis masterclasses. So all we got to see in this game was the Browns just be bad. At this point, why did you bench Jameis? I get that you guys are going for the Cam Wards of the world and, the Shador Sanders, but putting out DTR is just painful on the eyes. You should pay. If you're going to do that, can you at least give your fans sunglasses so they can block their eyes from the sun or the inevitable black hole that is the Cleveland Browns offense? Like, that just wasn't fair to your fans. Fans who have put up with absolute torture the last entire lifetime of being a Cleveland Browns fan. You should give them sunglasses. The whole fan base, everyone in the dog pound, deserves to get sunglasses rather than watching DTR play football instead of Jameis. So shame on the Browns. They want to lose, so I guess it's good for them, but I hope you win the next 2 games so you're screwed out of a draft pick.
Yeah, they won't though. I mean, starting DTR needs CPR is the exact way you go and you clinch a top pick here because it looks like the Raiders are going to try and tough it out here. The Raiders, they have pride there. We don't want the number 1 pick. We want to play for pride. That's what the Raiders are all about. Raiders football. Lose out on a top quarterback, but at least we have our pride here. Now, Cleveland has a chance to get there, and they want to see, I guess, what they have with DTR, but the moment DTR stepped on the field, he looked lost, and the guy can't even complete a screen pass here. I mean, DTR is not the answer, and you're robbing us from iconic Jameis Winston quotes here, and maybe you're worried Jameis can win a game. but chances are you're probably going to lose, especially since you're playing against the Cincinnati team who needs to win out to make the playoffs here. You're going up against the best quarterback in football this season, at least statistically, and then you're going up against the best wide receiver in football this year, at least statistically, in Jamar Chase, and then you're going up against an absolute monster that's been born this season in Chase Brown, and then you also have the Yoshibas of the world. Like, Cincinnati will be fine. Also, what a huge tight end Drew Sample is. We were talking about how small Kyle Pitts is. Drew Sample is a tight end. I mean, you see that guy coming at you, it's like, no, thank you. Do I want to get a shoulder lowered at me and hit by Drew Sample? Absolutely not. But you go out there, look absolutely lost with DTR, and it's like, okay, I guess I can respect going for a number 1 pick, but like, I would rather see anyone else besides DTR because we've seen enough. We saw him play last year. This isn't a guy we're like, oh, maybe we have something with him. Like, you want to go out there and draft your rookie quarterback. You're going to do something similar with what the Broncos did with Bo Nix. Hopefully, you're not doing that with Quinn Ewers, even though it's probably looking like Quinn Ewers is probably going to return to the draft because literally all Texas A&M fans hate him. They call him the 12th man in Austin, and he's like, was supposed to be the number 1 pick coming into the draft this year, and now he may stay in college and transfer because Arch Manning is on his heels. So, if you want to go out there, get someone like Shador Sanders, I get it. And then the Bengals, like, you went out there, you beat the Browns. Good for you. You beat DTR, needs CPR, but like, I feel like their defense, every problem we've had with them can be summed up in that one play where your linebacker has an interception. Why are you jumping on his back trying to take it from him? Why is the corner jumping on the linebacker's back trying to take away an interception? I don't understand. And it like sums up like every single frustration with the Cincinnati Bengals this season. Like, oh, let me jump on your back and take away an interception that you had in your hands, and then it drops to the ground. Like, Belichick would have cut him the next day. I don't care who you are. You don't do that.
Yeah, it was shameful. It was a shameful play. But they beat the Browns. They're now in the playoff mix. They might actually make the playoffs finally. Let's talk about the dead corpse that is the Chicago Bears. If you're a hunter, Travis Hunter, Detroit Lions beating up on the dead carcass that is the Chicago Bears. It's almost sad to watch the Bears right now because not only do they not have a coach, they soon will not have a GM. But this is a team that had so much hope going into the season. They haven't had this much hope since Mitch Trubisky back in 2017, maybe. And they're just, every game, they're just getting dragged through the mud. Caleb Williams completely shot his confidence. And, the Lions, you talk about a team that bounced back from a win. Bounced back with some pride. We saw Jared Goff had nearly a perfect game. Jahmyr Gibbs stepping in, plays a great game as well. But yeah, for the Bears, they really got to get the coach right. If they don't get the coach right, Caleb Williams is going to be a bust, unfortunately. And I don't want that to be the case, but I've never seen a coaching hire this important going into the season. The Brown, like, if they fuck this up, if this isn't a Ben Johnson or just an elite head coach, they're fucked. The Bears are going to suck for the next decade.
Yeah. And I think with the Bears, you have to go with someone who's proven. You have to go with someone who's already shown they can be a successful NFL head coach and maybe just didn't have the quarterback there. And, you can go defense there. But I think this is a situation where you're looking at, if you're not going super offense, you're going with someone like Mike Vrabel here, who's kind of been patiently waiting because he's someone who he's just a leader of men. And he has that intense vibe where he can fix someone like Caleb Williams, whether it's personality issues, whether it's confidence for him, what have you, just kind of his moping antics on the sideline. Like, Mike Vrabel is someone who can get that out. He got the best out of Ryan Tannehill, and if he can do that, he can do it with Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams is not a lost cause by any stretch of the imagination. Like, we've seen quarterbacks not be the leader of their team, and we've seen quarterbacks not necessarily even be the best player on their team, But with someone like Caleb Williams, like just look at how bad someone like Jared Goff was the first year of his career with Jeff Fisher. And then you switch over to Sean McVay, and then suddenly Jared Goff is in the Super Bowl. He's making conference championship games. He's made multiple of those here, which, not a lot of quarterbacks have. Is even the elite quarterbacks in the game, like Lamar's only been to one. Josh Allen has only been to one conference championship game. Justin Herbert has never won a playoff game, and people think he's better than Jared Goff. So like Caleb Williams can definitely be fixed here, and I don't think that's the issue because you have talent on that team. It like comes down to your offensive line a little bit. He's running for his life, but I think you get someone like a Mike Vrabel who can just overhaul our organization. He has the intensity to kind of bring that team to the next level. So I think the Bears, they have hope here, and I think they'll be able to get it done. However, will the organization make the right decision and actually go out there and get someone like Mike Vrabel? Or are they going to be like, Bobby Slowick was a good offensive coordinator last year. Let's give him a try. Or let's go out there. We need an offensive guy. Everyone's telling us we need an offensive guy. Arthur Smith fixed Russell Wilson. Why don't we hire someone like Arthur Smith? That's in reality what's probably going to happen.
I hope not. But for the Bears' sake, let's see what happens. Let's get this Jets game out of the way. Rams and Jets. You want to talk about one dead carcass to another? I don't know if Jets are considered carcasses or not, but in this sake, we'll say they are. Jets, 9 points. Aaron Rodgers, it's the same old shit. I'm not going to rain on their parade. And if I have to construe a game of what can be the biggest grind offensive game that this team wins out on, used to be the Steelers. Now it's the Rams. When the Rams want to just get into those gritty, tough, brutally rigid offensive games, the Rams have their number. Because Kyron Williams is a good running back, and Matt Stafford's a good quarterback, and obviously they got the weapons there. But yet they have these games that they just score. It's 19-9. You're going to see a lot of field goals in this game. We saw the same thing against the Niners last week. And outside of the Bills game where they had this explosion of points, they've really kind of 20 points is their limit, it feels like. And it's just another one of those games. They face the Cardinals next week. They'll probably win 17-13. And then the Seahawks game, who knows? But just one of those games. It's just one of those offenses. It's just always just such a drag to watch. How did you feel about this Jets and Rams game?
I thought the Jets could win in an upset, and they got my hopes up. I saw the touchdown from Aaron to Devontae. I'm like, vintage Aaron Rodgers play action handoff. Aaron Rodgers makes a little bit of action happen in the pocket, little tap dance back there, and then hits Devontae. I'm like, okay, we got a game here. And then Adam Lazard dropped a pass. Adam Lazard dropped another pass, and they fumbled the ball after a punt here, and it was error after error after error, drop pass, turnover, muffed punt here. And the Rams at this point are the definition of playing to your competition, like the literal definition of playing to your competition. Mike Tomlin teams have been criticized over the years of playing to their competition, and like Mike Tomlin have both won a Super Bowl here, but the Rams this season, like, okay, are the Bills going to drop 40? Okay, it's time for us to drop 40. And then are the Jets going to score 9? Okay, let's go out there and score 19. It's like, what? Who even goes out there and scores 19 points? I don't even understand how you get to that score. It's something that's so preposterous here. And then your defense shows up, shuts down the Jets. So it's like, okay, you just gave the final send off for the Jets here, beat them by 10 points. But it's just one of those games where it's like, it's just not inspiring me to see them in the playoffs. Like, I'd rather see, Seattle with like DK Metcalf. I want to see Jackson Smith and Jigba in the playoffs and see Devon Witherspoon step up. I want to see Boye Mafe, those guys in the playoffs here. Like with the Rams, it's just so uninspiring versus the Jets. I was like, maybe we'll get like another classic Aaron Rodgers and Stafford matchup. Like, yeah, it would have been a classic Aaron Rodgers and Stafford matchup if this was taking place in the era where they still had leather helmets for footballs. Like, that's the exact feel this game had.
Yeah, and it was a nightmare. And again, it was another one of those Jets games where you had hope, they had the lead, but you still have no faith that the Jets are going to pull it out. And that's what
No.
it's been. There's probably been a minimum of 3 games where they have the lead and nobody believes they're going to keep it, not even the Jets. And that's exactly what happened. Into the fourth quarter, granted it was only 9-6, but you just knew they were going to fuck it up, and they did. And then they're looking at the score and they lose. I'm not surprised at all. Jets will Jets.
Yeah.
Team that did not. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say in other news, who had Jonathan Taylor on their fantasy team this week?
Dude, tell me about it. I'm lucky I didn't face this guy, but we're talking 40 comes out of nowhere. Jonathan Taylor, he was the fantasy darling a couple years ago, and then he's still a solid running back, but he goes out there 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, just goes on an absolute mission. And I think the Colts found out that the best way to win, especially against the Titans, is Anthony Richardson just shouldn't throw the ball. If he doesn't throw the ball, they're going to be pretty good. And that's what happened because, 7 of 11, 113 yards, not bad. And then you give Jonathan Taylor the ball 30 times, and they're not going to be able to stop that. Jonathan Taylor, when he's at his best, is one of the best running backs in football. Top 5 at least.
When he's at his best, he's like right up there number 1, and then like Mason Rudolph started throwing darts and it ends up making it a close game. But yeah, I agree. Like maybe if you're the Indianapolis Colts, you should realize you paid Jonathan Taylor for a reason. He was the best running back in the league not too long ago. So maybe instead of trying to run it with Anthony Richardson, we should run it with our running back. That's a great idea. And you end up having Jonathan Taylor go off. Now is it versus a Tennessee Titans team that's realizing they might need a lose here and they're just trying to make it competitive. Mason Rudolph is playing for just being a perpetual backup, maybe, but this is a team that's trying to make the playoffs. And I like that Jonathan Taylor went to the end zone, and I was looking for his celebration. I was like, I bet his celebration is going to have to do with something like not dropping the ball. And that's exactly what happened, because last week he pretty much dropped their season out of the end zone. They were beating Denver. They should have beat Denver in that game. You're up 13-7. Could have gone up 20-7. And then Denver scores 24 unanswered ever since he's just dropped the ball out of the end zone there. So I'm like, you know what? I feel like his first touchdown celebration is going to be his teammates trying to take the ball away from him. Exactly what happened there. So it's like, it's just frustrating because like this Colts team should be so good, but Anthony Richardson is just, you
So
said
bad.
it. He's the Black Tim Tebow.
He's the Black Tim Tebow. But Jonathan Taylor, for those who are going into the fantasy finals, best of luck. May his luck continue. Or if you're facing him next week, may his luck run out. But they get the win. They're still alive in the playoffs. And then talk about maybe the best game of the week, arguably. Commanders and Eagles. We had that last-second heroic with Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels throws for 5 touchdowns. I feel like after this game cements himself as Rookie of the Year, at least on the quarterback position. You could argue Brock Bowers otherwise, but Jaden Daniels has an absolute game. Jalen Hurts get concussed in this game. We got a Kenny Pickett sighting. Gross. Saquon Barkley continues on his MVP run. A.J. Brown, 15 targets. Let's see if he bitches about this in the media this week. We shall see. But Commanders, get that last-second win, have a fourth-quarter comeback. Does this give you more faith in the Commanders after this game, erasing the Cliff Kingsbury curse? Or do you think this is partially because Kenny Pickett was playing most of the game?
Yeah, I think it partially has to do with Kenny Pickett playing in this game, even though he had the exact same stat line that Jalen Hurts has had all season long, which is like 150 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Like he pretty much did what Jalen Hurts has been doing all season long. The difference was he got the ball to AJ Brown, and he's like, maybe I should throw the ball to him at least 15 times in this game. But we saw Saquon, he still had 150 yards rushing in this game. Kenny Pickett, was he Jalen Hurts in this game? No, because you don't have his running ability. So I think if Hurts plays, you probably win this game. But at the same time, if the Commanders don't have Butterfingers and turn the ball over 5 times, this game wouldn't have even been close, and you could have potentially dropped 50 points in this game. I mean, you have 3 fumbles, 2 interceptions in this game, and then you keep pushing find a way to win, and then I picked the Commanders to win this game. Not the way I thought they'd come out on top in this game with Kenny Pickett showing up, and then, Morgan Wallen's doppelganger himself came in there, threw a touchdown to A.J. Brown, like, oh, he looks pretty good. Very next drive, interception of Frankie Liv. I was like, okay, Kenny Pickett is back, and he looked terrible the rest of the game. But the fact that Jaden Daniels was able to just muster up the guts at this end of this game, someone who people just wrote off the Commanders here, and to a lesser degree, they're like a similar version to what happened with the Minnesota Vikings, where Minnesota Vikings come out firing, and they have a little bit of a rough stretch, kind of have to refine themselves, and then Cliff Kingsbury and the offense has pulled it back together. And you know who made this difference in this game for the Washington Commanders? A guy who's sat out most of the season, but Jamison Crowder comes back. Turns out when you have a number 2 wide receiver, that helps a lot. And the touchdown that he had in this game was absolutely sick. Playing like he's going to block it, just hesitate, corner bites. And as soon as that happens, you're in the back of the end zone, wide open. And then, it's up to your quarterback from there to hit you. And Jaden Daniels hit him in that play. But the fact that you come out in this game, team that people are like, oh yeah, joking, are the Commanders going to make the playoffs? Like, yes, the Commanders are going to make the playoffs. Jaden Daniels is still the best quarterback. We called him being the best quarterback coming into the draft here. He was the Heisman winner out of LSU, and then he showed nothing but guts in this game, throwing for 5 touchdowns. Crazy. He's not the only quarterback who can throw for 5 touchdowns in the NFL. Go figure. And then you just have, Zacchaeus, of all people, getting involved for 5 catches. You have Terry McLaurin. Then you have Jamison Crowder coming back with 2 touchdowns, being important in the red zone. Like, this Commanders team is going to be a tough out, because guess what? They're going into the playoffs, and should they be in the playoffs? No. They're not supposed to be there, which is going to put all of the pressure on their opponent. Most likely, going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. So we're going to get a 3-peat of this matchup, most likely. Either that, or you're going to be the 6th seed, play a team like potentially the Rams or Seattle, which I think you definitely could beat the Rams there. So definitely could see a Commanders team in the divisional round here. And then from there, probably going to play Detroit. Detroit doesn't really have a defense anymore, so we'll see how that goes.
Anything can happen. NFL is coming around, and right now they're the 7th seed, so they would face the Eagles. I think they're all but locked in. You have the Bucks and Seahawks on their tail. Everyone else is eliminated. I think there's a good chance that they're probably going to make that a playoff run. I think if they win next week, they clinch. So we'll preview that later this week. A game that I called, a game that I saw from a mile away, Panthers and Cardinals. I saw this game in the aftermath of it. This was the most obvious game to pick. First of all, we have a Panthers team that has played competitive over the last 5 weeks. Outside of the Cowboys game, they've played well. And a Cardinals team that Kyler doesn't want to play anymore. It's double XP weekend. He doesn't care. He's over it. And in this game, Kyler plays like dog shit. The offense is yet again. They put up 30 points. We have a big game from James Conner. But when it mattered most, Kyler, not only does he have a forward pass, but he also throws it to the other team. The game is over. And outside of that, there's not really much I can say about the Cardinals. I'm glad that they're eliminated because they deserve to be eliminated. They are a very disappointing team to follow. And then for the Panthers, Bryce Young continuing on his upward trajectory. He started off obviously throwing passes backwards, and now he's played pretty well since he's gotten benched, and 2 touchdowns, 0 picks, completing 65% of his passes. So Bryce Young played a good game in this game. Chuba Hubbard ran all over the Cardinals defense, and Panthers get a win that they deserve.
Panthers get a win, and then coming into this week, one could say that they were, due for a win. It's like they'd lost some games. They should have won. They should have beat Philadelphia, which is absolutely crazy. I forget who dropped the pass, but Bryce Young hits him in the hands, drops the pass there. But this game looked tough because message me at one point, you're like looking good with the Panthers and Cardinals, and then the Cardinals immediately get a touchdown after that. I'm like, I don't know. Are the refs going to get involved? Are they going to try and make that NFC West more competitive than it needs to be and make it a 3-team race instead of a 2-team race here? Well, the Panthers ended up coming out. They get the touchdown in overtime. This team has been all about guts this season, where it looked like the same old Panthers coming into the season. You're like, oh dear God, is this gonna be 17 games of this? We're gonna have to watch essentially what it's like for any grown adult man with taste watching like the Real Housewives. Like, is this what it's gonna be like? You're like watching one of the most painful. It's like watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and then suddenly he gets benched. You bench Bryce Young, and then Andy Dalton goes out there, plays fine. He does Andy Dalton things, and then Bryce Young comes back in, and he looks like a totally different quarterback. He looks rejuvenated. He looks like he found his love for football again, where he was talking about earlier in the season, like, don't, like, I've kind of lost my love for football, kind of love that passion, kind of lost that fire inside of me. And then suddenly, when you have a good coach, it's like you can tell when you have a good NFL coach here. And then Dave Canales looks like he has command of the team. It looks like that team actually respects him, and it looks like they're, dare I say, having fun, even though they're one of the worst teams in the league. They're like one of the teams that's 4-11 here that is having some of the most fun of any bad team here outside of maybe the Jaguars with Mac Jones, and they lost this week. But like, this Panthers team is having fun, and I think Dave Canales has earned a shot at returning with this Panthers team. And what he's done this season, even though it's 4 wins, it's like really impressive after losing Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu, kind of having your running backs decimated by injuries this year, being able to fix Bryce Young and turn him into a quarterback who in this game looked better than Kyler Murray. Like, he looked like the better quarterback here. It's like, you don't think Bryce Young would love to have Marvin Harrison Jr.? Like, Kyler Murray just doesn't care about Marvin Harrison Jr. He doesn't care about his career, how well he does. Like, someone like DeAndre Hopkins commands respect. Same with even AJ Green, to a lesser respect there when they're on the field there. Like, D-Hop, like, I need to get mine. Like, sorry, but like, Marvin Harrison Jr. is just not at that point where he can command that sort of respect and that sort of chemistry from Kyler Murray with him to put the work in. Like, he's just a rookie coming in here. Kyler Murray has Call of Duty on his mind. It's like, it's just not, I don't know. It's just not the right fit for the Cardinals. So could you see Kyler getting traded, or do you think Jonathan Gannon kind of is stuck with him this year or next year?
I don't even know if Jonathan Gannon's going to be the guy next year. We don't know. They might not keep him. I think they've improved in some aspects as a team, but overall, I think they should probably look to trade Kyler Murray. Your offense is good enough that you could probably fill in. Maybe they're a team that goes after Sam Darnold, potentially. A guy that would have decent weapons and a coach that we don't really know much about. But I think that they could be a team that goes after Sam Darnold. Kyler, if you can trade Kyler, I think there's plenty of teams that would take him. It's not like Kyler's necessarily a bad quarterback. It's just whether or not he's motivated. I think it's run its course in Arizona. And this game, for me, I think is the nail in the coffin. Go out and trade him. You can get first-round picks for him, or at least a couple of second-round picks. Go out and trade him and see what you can get overall. A couple of games here that I'm just going to skip because we talked about. We already talked about the Bills game and the Raiders game, but Vikings and Seahawks staying in the NFC West here. Another one of those games that came down to the wire. Vikings prevailed. And at this point, with Sam Darnold, I think it's time we give this man some respect. We say it each week. I'm a guy that was definitely hesitant to fully embrace this guy because we saw him seeing ghosts in New York, and we saw him play terribly in Carolina, but 32 touchdowns, 11 picks. He's thrown for what will be 4,000 yards when it's all said and done. There's a formula with Sam Darnold. Get him weapons, get him an offensive line, and get him a coach that is one of the best in the league. And Sam Darnold's going to cook. He's going to play great. He's going to have a couple of games where maybe you start to see some of the cracks in the armor, but all season long he's been consistent. They're 13-2, and they still have a shot at the 1 seed for a team that we thought would be finishing in last. Like, I definitely have been critical of Sam Darnold in the past, but at this point, he deserves a shot. He deserves to get paid somewhere, whether it's Minnesota or not. There's a renaissance of Sam Darnold, and it's happy to see for them. Good for the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm happy to see it for the NFL this year because I didn't want to see Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison have to punt on an NFL season. Like, that's not what anyone in the NFL should want to see this year either. And, coming into the year, I was higher than most on the Vikings. Did I think they would be this good? Absolutely not. And I would be lying if I told you that. But I was like, maybe they could get 8 or 9 wins and kind of be in that frisky wild card mix. And they are in a frisky wild card mix, but it's going to be because it may be the best wild card in NFL history, where you're having a team literally making history in the Commanders this year, where this is the best Commanders team since the 80s. Like, this is the best Commanders team in 40 years for that franchise. And then the Minnesota Vikings still have the chance to be the number 1 seed and have the potential to be the best wild card team ever. I mean, what
insane.
if they're not the 1 seed, they're going to be the only wild card team to be 14-3. It's absolutely ridiculous. What other wild card team can you think of off the top of your head went 13-3, went 14-3? Like, you would be hard pressed to find one. And we can see if we can, but like Sam Darnold this season, what he looks like to me is a bigger, stronger Kirk Cousins with a clutch gene this year. And like, that's exactly what he's looked like. He's been able to get his weapons the ball and he hasn't flinched. And just the fact this season, like any time that they've needed to play the past few games, like he's been able to come up with it and deliver. And like the Vikings have been in close games the past few weeks where they've just needed a drive at the end of the game to seal the deal. And this was honestly, outside of the Commanders and Eagles, but like Kenny Pickett was playing in that game. So like this game had a lot more playoff implications. I felt like it had a lot more implications than the Eagles and Commanders. I feel like this game was like a real test for Minnesota and they've been able to come through. So just the fact that Kevin O'Connell has been able to just pull this team together and then just little additions here and there. Aaron Jones, thank God. Thank God we don't have to bring back players like Cam Akers, even though I do think they brought him back this year. Like, thank God he's not your starting running back this season. Thank God that's not who we're running it out with here. And then you add like a piece here, like Van Ginkel on defense, making a big play in this game, getting to Geno Smith, making some sacks in this game, and then your defense getting the crucial turnover at the end of the game to seal it. Like, this is a complete team. This team is fully bought into their head coach here. And like, if Dan Campbell doesn't win Coach of the Year, which he should because he's leading his team to the greatest season in franchise history for the Detroit Lions, at least as far as the regular season, like if it's not Dan Campbell, would I be upset if you gave it to Kevin O'Connell? No, because you have to look at the expectations. Like, were they supposed to be in the playoffs? No. Was Sam Darnold supposed to be someone who you could argue is a MVP candidate? Maybe you put him like number 6. Maybe he's not the MVP, but maybe he's at least in consideration there. Maybe it's like Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, Saquon Barkley, Lamar Jackson here, like for MVP. Like, okay, yeah, I could see that. But and then Justin Jefferson in this game is like Sam Darnold just knows how to get the ball to his guys this season. So it's like this is a really impressive team, and any given Sunday, anything can happen. And that Lions and Vikings game is going to be the most important game, maybe, of the entire NFL season.
Yeah, and I'm looking here. The best wild card record of all time was the Tennessee Titans in '99, who, by the way, made it to the Super Bowl and almost won the Super Bowl and got down on the 1-yard line. They were 1 yard away from the Super Bowl. So we'll see if history repeats itself, whether it's with the Lions or the Vikings. But
what was the record?
That's the best wild card record of all time.
What was it?
13-3 for the Tennessee Titans in '99. So it's possible.
Okay.
Anything's possible. I'm going to skip the Raiders game because I'm going to talk about them in the worst top 5.
We already talked about them, kind of.
Yeah. We have the Miami 49ers taking on the San Francisco Dolphins here. Dolphins cruise to a win. Devon Achane, 120 yards. Anything noteworthy to talk about a dead corpse of a team that is the 49ers?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like at some point we get to like a certain point in the NFL season, like you just have some of these 4 o'clock games that are just like painful. Like, it looks like one of the teams, like, no matter what they do, everything looks hard. Like, Brock Purdy's, like, trying as hard as possible as, like, 313 passing yards, is 26 for 40 in this game. So it's like not a bad game for him, but you look up and it's 17-29 in this game. So it's like 49ers are eliminated from the playoffs. So can we take that victory lap now, where we said that coming into the season, we said the 49ers were going to miss the playoffs. Everyone said we were crazy. Like, how could you pick the 49ers to miss the playoffs? Like, because everyone on their team is going to get hurt, because that's exactly what happened last time they made the Super Bowl. And you know who is going to win the division? The Rams. And we both picked the Rams to win the NFC West this year. And then guess what? The Rams are probably going to win the division this year, because you play the Cardinals and then you play Seattle. All you have to do is beat Seattle, win, and you're in. So you're going to be prepping ahead of time for the Seattle Seahawks. But I mean, it is so hard being so right on this team. But we have the documents here, and that's how we picked the San Francisco 49ers. Like, oh, that's such a hot take. Like, no, not really. We picked the Cowboys to miss the playoffs, Niners to miss the playoffs, and, you know, hurts to be so right so often.
They're both out at this point. We predicted the Super Bowl hangover too, which is inevitable. Like, this is something that if you watch football and you know history, that you know this is something that's going to happen. We knew it wasn't going to be the Chiefs. We knew it was going to be the Niners. The Niners have been riddled with injuries all year, and now they have some tough decisions to make. We'll see what they do with Brock Purdy. The Cowboys game, although actually let's talk about the Packers real quick, because this game just ended. Packers blow out the Saints 34-0. Saints are held to under 200 yards. Jordan Love continues on his Toyota-thon run, and Spencer Rattler completes 50% of his passes. It's looking like this was a Guantanamo Bay Saints classic game. And then another game for Jordan Love where he's played excellent. Won't get his flowers that he deserves, but Josh Jacobs runs all over them. Manuel Wilson has a good game as well. Packers 34-0. They win. They're 11-4. Arguably the best division in NFL history, arguably. We have 3 teams that are going to potentially win 13 games if it's all said and done.
That's crazy.
Because the Packers face the Vikings and Bears. So maybe they could still technically beat the Vikings, and they face the Bears and beat
Vikings
13-4.
next.
Yep. That's going to be great. And then the last game to cover from this past week was Cowboys and
real
Bucks.
quick about the Saints real quick. Was it worth it prepping the game plan in the freezer?
Yeah.
10 degrees.
Yeah.
I sent you that, right? Where Spencer Rattler was like, yeah, to prepare for this game, since it's going to be 10 degrees in Green Bay, the coaching staff took us into the freezer, which is the same temperature that it's going to be on Lambeau Field. Well, you got your ass kicked anyways. Was it worth it?
Was it worth it? The answer is no. You got your ass kicked. Cowboys and Bucks, though. Cowboys got eliminated. We can do the victory lap there. But in this game, we saw the Cowboys put up points 26-24. Baker Mayfield played a pretty good game overall. Bucky Irving, typical Bucks offense, did well. But I think the big takeaway, this is the game that we were both talking about privately off air. Cooper Rush. If we compare his numbers to Dak Prescott, it's not that different. And I'll pull up the numbers here, but my big takeaway here is, am I crazy here? Or I should say, are we crazy here? Or are the Cowboys better with Cooper Rush than with Dak Prescott? Because they've won 4 of the last 5 games. They put up points. They had a 5-game bender where they lost 5 straight games, but ever since, they've been on a tear. And they might finish the season still with a winning season, potentially, if they can beat the Eagles and Commanders. So, it's crazy to say Cooper Rush is not that much worse, or better yet, maybe better than Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I mean, my thing with Dak Prescott is I don't think he's like a bad quarterback. I think he's above average, sure. Is he top 10? In my opinion, no. Because when your quarterback warrants to be the highest paid quarterback in the league and he's average, that is the worst possible case scenario for your franchise, because this is a guy who can't get past the divisional round, who can't ever be in an MVP conversation. It's literally against NFL scripture. It's against the NFL law. Dak Prescott can never win an MVP here. And like, the Cowboys just come out flat sometimes when Dak Prescott is starting, and it doesn't seem like there's the same level of energy deficiency when Cooper Rush is the starter. I'm not trying to say that there's anything there, but I'm not trying to not say that there isn't anything there. And when your numbers are that similar, Cooper Rush is just trying to win the game and manage it and not lose it, where Dak Prescott is just trying to, be a star. It kind of seems like he was put into the league. He was a star quarterback here. It's like the biggest difference between Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott is this. It's the money. Like, would you rather? I would rather pay someone like Cooper Rush $15 million a year and then actually have a really good team, because I've seen Nick Foles win a Super Bowl. I've seen Blake Bortles get to a conference championship game. I've seen Case Keenum get to a conference championship game with the Minnesota Vikings, because when your quarterback isn't average and getting paid the most money of every quarterback in the league, you actually have money to pay people at other positions. And when the numbers don't lie there, and they're really not that different with what we've seen this season, and Cooper Rush isn't a turnover machine, and he still knows how to use CeeDee Lamb. Crazy when you have one of the best wide receivers in the league. You see a player like Sam Darnold get plugged into Minnesota, suddenly look really good. You have a really good coach in Dave Canales go to Carolina and then suddenly turn around. Bryce Young, you have Baker Mayfield suddenly get turned around on a team-friendly deal. Like, those are the guys that you should be looking for so you can afford to pay a team around him. But, like, it's not that I don't like Dak Prescott. It's just that he's the worst possible quarterback for your team to have. And it's unfortunate, and it's not Dak's fault. And I think, Dak Prescott has had good numbers, and I'm glad that Dak Prescott has been able to earn himself a lot of money and earn generational wealth for his family. Like, no shade to him, but for the Cowboys, like Jerry's son, the Dallas Cowboys, I need to keep my boys around. It's like, there's a point where you're just not going to be good if you're paying an average quarterback that much money, where you look better with Cooper Rush, who's getting paid like what, $2 million? Not even.
Yeah, I looked it up. Dak Prescott this year is going to make $44 million. And Cooper Rush this year is going to make $2 million. But I have the numbers in front of me, because look at the numbers, and the numbers are not that different. In fact, Cooper Rush's numbers are better. In 8 games this year, Dak Prescott had 11 touchdowns, 8 picks, and a QBR of 86. Total yards breaks down to about 240 a game. Just about. Cooper Rush is 4-3 in his games, in 7 games. He is 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns, 3 picks, QBR of 87. Passing yards per game are a lot lower. It's 150. But at the same time, they're winning games. We're seeing Rico Doidle get involved really well. We're seeing CeeDee Lamb, who probably would get involved no matter who's the quarterback. But we're seeing a guy where, if the numbers are that similar, but it cost you $40 million less, and not only that, you're in a situation with the Cowboys where you just paid CeeDee Lamb, you have Dak Prescott, and then you also have Micah Parsons, who's a guy that you are probably going to want to pay. Paying Cooper Rush $2 million or maybe $10 million, and having Micah Parsons, who's going to demand $40 million annually, most likely, it's going to be one of those things you should look in the mirror and say, okay, well, Dak Prescott's getting older. Cooper Rush, yeah, maybe he's a bridge quarterback. Maybe we look to the draft to find our replacement. But if you're getting this level of production from Cooper Rush, and Dak Prescott is getting the same production but $50 million more, I just feel like it's a no-brainer at that point. And maybe I'm delusional, I don't know, but I just feel like Cooper Rush, for the level of production that he gives you compared to Dak, you should consider trading Dak if you can get draft capital, get off the contract, and save money, because you have to pay a bunch of people. You'd be a fool not to. You also have to pay Deron Bland potentially. Like, if you're going to keep all these players around, it's going to be impossible with Dak Prescott's contract.
Yeah, it'll be impossible with Dak's contract. And you mentioned, like, hey, maybe Cooper Rush doesn't have the same amount of yards as Dak because he's trailing less, because he's thrown 5 less interceptions, but he's thrown the same amount of touchdowns in one less game as Dak
2 less
Prescott.
games.
And then out, what? 2 less?
Two less games.
Yeah, and he's thrown the same amount of touchdowns. He's thrown 5 less interceptions. He's only thrown 3 picks here, so you're getting similar production. And then he's fine giving the ball to Rico Dowdle. He's not going to check out of the play, and he's not trailing as much. Where Dak Prescott seems like he has this kink for getting behind and seeing how close he can almost win the game. It's like, oh, I was down 28 to nothing, but then we only lost 38-42. We only lost by 1 possession here, and then I had a bunch of yards. Look at my numbers. That's what the Dak Prescott fans always say. It was like, no, like, unfortunately, to your point, like you said, you'd be a fool not to trade Dak Prescott, and I can see him in a Titans uniform right now, but Jerry Jones is your owner. So you are going to have a fool that's not going to trade him.
These are all hypotheticals. We all know the Cowboys are going to keep them, and they're going to just keep paying people, and they're going to continue being mediocre because that's what they've been. That was all the games in Week 16. Obviously, we have Christmas coming up, so we're going to talk about the Christmas movies. We'll quickly preview these 3 games that we're going to miss before our next episode. Wednesday, Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Kansas City favored at 3 points. I'm done betting against the Chiefs for the rest of the season. I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win that game and cover. I think Pittsburgh is just going through a gauntlet right now. And on Christmas, I'm picking the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm picking the Chiefs as well. And who am I to pick against Patrick Mahomes, the real golden boy of the NFL? And then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs in how many days? 11. Like, that is a absolutely ridiculously brutal schedule. I mean, you go from Sunday getting your ass kicked against the best defense in the NFL, at least heading into that Commanders game on Sunday with the Philadelphia Eagles, and then you go up against the Baltimore Ravens, and then Russell Wilson turns into dare I say the Russell Wilson we saw last season, where the difference in that game was a Russell Wilson fumble where you had a chance to tie it up, make it 14-14. And then you had a Russell Wilson interception when you just got an interception from Lamar. And then Russ is like, I'll do you one better. Here you go. Free pick 6, blows the game wide open for the Baltimore Ravens. So do I think that Steelers are suddenly going to snap out of it versus the Kansas City Chiefs, when the Kansas City Chiefs kind of cruised and they were kind of laughing at the Houston Texans on the sideline last week? Like, no, I don't. And they were able to handle Russell Wilson just fine the past few years. So I don't even think it'll be a close game, to be honest. I think this will be one of the Chiefs' best wins of the year. And I think they've saved their best footballs for, you guessed it, heading into the playoffs in the end of the season, which is what the Kansas City Chiefs do here. So let's go. Kansas City wins this game 31-17. Similar score to the Ravens and Steelers game.
I'm going to go with the same score. Then we have Baltimore versus Houston. From what I've seen against the Texans, I'm not betting on the Texans either. No longer the Texans whisperer, unfortunately. Baltimore has a mission. Lamar has a mission. Lamar is hearing the noise. Him not being the favorite for MVP is completely blasphemous. They're favored at 5 points. I'll take the points for the Ravens on Christmas Day. And I think we're going to see a classic show out from both Mahomes and Lamar Jackson on Christmas Day. And we get 3-4 touchdowns from Lamar, and he cruises to a win.
Yeah, I think they cruise to a win as well. It'll be a tough game here. I could see the Texans hang around the first half, but just haven't liked what I've seen. And you're the Texans whisper when they were at their lowest, and you kind of brought this franchise back to life. And they took all of that good faith and just threw it out the window. It's like, oh, you're gonna let me spend $30,000 without having the cash in my account on these stocks here? Well, I'm not gonna bring the cash in and say it was fraud and then sell them and take all my money and then run off to Costa Rica. And that's exactly what the Texans did. But thankfully, you are now the Panthers practitioner, and that is your new franchise that you have been calling with all of those games here. So you have the Panthers as your new ally here. This is a new team you're the whisper of, where the Texans, they took your heart and then they just threw it out the door, stomped on it. So I can't pick the Texans to win another game, because there's no really moving up from the 4th seed here. Now, technically, they would have a better record than the Ravens if they won this game and the Steelers won. So if they win this game, they could be the 3 seed. But are they going to win this game?
No,
Absolutely not. Their
no.
offense has looked horrendous. I would say
Yeah.
over under Kyle Hamilton, 3 interceptions in this game from CJ Stroud. Potentially take the over. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Over under 46.5. I'll take the over there. And then Thursday night football, we have Seahawks and Bears. And this is not really fair. We all know what Hawks do to dead carcasses, which is the Chicago Bears. The Seahawks, you might as well call them the Savages, the Vultures, because the Bears are pathetic. They're sad. It's almost embarrassment porn watching the Bears play these last couple of weeks. Seahawks are favored at 3.5. I'll easily take the Seahawks in this game. Hot take: the Bears aren't winning another game. Seahawks, they're playing for a division. Geno Smith, he played a great game last week, so give me the Seahawks easily.
Yeah. The Chicago Bears who fell for the stumble fake. Are you kidding me? Like, oh, Jared Goff pretends to fall over and then turns around and immediately throws a strike to the end zone to Sam Laporta, who's wide open. And then Seattle is just coming out of a battle with the Minnesota Vikings. Like, they have the Rams on their mind. They need to win this game. And then Seattle's like, we beat the Chicago Bears and we get a mini bye to rest and recover versus the Rams. This is the perfect storm for us. This is the perfect situation for the Seattle Seahawks to get healthy and then have a great shot at taking out the Rams, because you get that mini bye. It's going to be one of the most important games of week 18 here. And then the Rams, playing up against the Cardinals, you think the Cardinals are dead. So maybe the Cardinals, randomly come alive for no reason in this game and decide to beat the Rams. We just can't explain the Cardinals this season, but I think this game's super important to Seattle, where the Bears have just given up at this point, and them going up against Seattle's defense, like over under 4 turnovers in this game. Take the over and hammer it, because I think Seattle probably going to drop 35 in this game. The Bears, will they drop 13 in this game? Will they drop 17? We don't know. We don't know what we're going to get.
All I know is that dead carcasses are not fun to watch, and that's what we're watching them. The Bears are dead, so it's over for them. But that's all the games when we preview here. But in between now and our next special here, we have Christmas. And don't we love Christmas? The capitalist holiday that we've grown to love. All the gifts that we'll be opening here. And I figured it's a tradition of ours to go over our favorite. We talked about our Thanksgiving movies that we loved. And why not talk about our favorite Christmas movies? Because you want to talk about a holiday that has a million Christmas movies. Christmas movies, they have a special place in our hearts. And some of them are better than others. Some of them are very good, and some of them are so bad they're great. As of now, right, what are the Christmas movies that you can't go the holiday season without watching? I know some of mine.
Yeah, so holiday movies that I can't go without watching is at number 1, and this is going to be a series, would be Home Alone. Like, this is like the Christmas movie, like it's just so rewatchable. You can watch it with the entire family. It's dark, and then if you rewatch that movie as an adult, like take a shot during that movie, or a Jello shot since it's Christmas. Every time you think Marv or Harry should have died in that movie,
You black
because
out.
A Quiet Place steals the nail scene from that movie where he steps on it, and then you're like, oh my god. There's so many like painful like moments, and then we saw like a little bit of that in Violent Night, where we get the rated R version where the guy falls off the ladder and the nail goes straight there. It's like we got like a little bit of a rated R version, which was super satisfying. So like at number 1, I actually like Home Alone 2 a little bit better, just because the setting of New York. So I'll go Home Alone 1 and 2. And then after that, the Santa Claus series. I just watched all 3 of those movies. Those movies are dark, man. I mean, if you want to be Santa, you kill him and then put on his jacket. Like, the movie like opens up and he's just like, the kid is moping. The kid's kind of annoying in that movie, and then suddenly his dad kills Santa, and like it just has like a very like offbeat vibe that like Tim Allen just fits. It's like Buzz Lightyear as Santa. So I like those movies. And then you have Elf, which I think is a classic. Another movie, like if you rewatch as an adult and you watched it a lot as a kid, and then you go like a year or two without watching it, and then you watch it like grown up, you're like, this movie's also kind of creepy.
Elf?
Like
Yeah,
Elf.
super creepy. Especially with him going to, New York? And then the way he
Yeah.
asks out the girl. It's rough. I mean, Elf was a great movie, but that's one of them. I would put in my top 3, I think Home Alone 1 is a little better, only because it feels like
Mm.
the second half of the movie is just them basically getting murdered. Whereas the second movie, it's basically the same as the first movie, except for you have a Trump cameo, and it's in New York, and it's still great. But the shit that they get into in the first movie, I don't know how the second movie even occurred. Because if I saw that kid after the shit he put me through going to jail, I wouldn't want to fuck with the kid. Like Kevin McAllister basically committed murder. You had burning heads. You had paint buckets thrown at us. He threw bricks at you. He iced the porch so you'd slip and fall. Like, he is a mastermind. And now he plays for the Cincinnati Bengals, which is great. Home Alone number 1. Number 1 for me. Number 2, this is by no means the best Christmas movie, but it's at least one of my favorites because it's just a cursed
Okay.
80s Christmas movie. Jingle All the Way. You rewatch
Oh,
it.
let's go.
You watch that movie, and it's peak Arnold Schwarzenegger post, I believe, the Mr. Freeze he was in Batman. And it's him as a dad trying to find this toy. And then he ends up...
Turbo Man.
Yeah, Turbo Man. And then he ends up becoming Turbo Man at the end of the movie. Like, this movie is insane. This is a perfect Christmas movie. Christmas movies need to be a little bit of cursed, a lot of laughs, and something that doesn't take itself seriously. And that movie does all of that, and it's hilarious all the way through. Arnold Schwarzenegger was born to be on the big screen, so number 2. And then number 3.
Yeah.
Ooh. Number 3 Christmas movie for me. I want to say Santa Claus, but you've said Santa Claus already. Honestly, Violent Night was really great. It does kind of copy Home Alone a little bit, but if we're talking about like a recent Christmas movie, I feel like it encapsulates exactly what we wanted, which is just a rated R Christmas movie. Now, is it one that I've revisited since it came out? Not necessarily, but it's a great Christmas movie. I'm sure there's some that I'm forgetting for sure because it's been a while, but those are just some that I think are worth going back to.
Yeah, no, I feel like of like the modern Christmas movies, I feel like Violent Night had like we watched it in theater together, like it captured a little bit of magic. I watched it in theater twice, and then I watched it after it came out on streaming. So I watched it like 4 times, like the year it came out, and then I watched it. It's one of those movies like that I want to watch like at the beginning of December and on Christmas. It's just been like one of those movies like I've kept going back to, and you find something a little bit new every time. And like a little bit of it is like you mentioned, like you can't take yourself too seriously, has to be a little bit of like nonsensical. And then you have like the kid in that movie, and it's like one of the only movies where the kid isn't fucking annoying. Like I feel like there's so many Christmas movies, like even in Jingle All the Way, in the
Like his
first Santa
suck.
Claus movies, like the kid is just so annoying in some of these Christmas movies. Even the kid in Elf, to a certain extent, is annoying, and it's just been one of my favorite Christmas movies. Like the violence, like the Home Alone scene, like when they're going up into the attic and then she's throwing bowling balls at them, and then when he takes the star and then he shoves it in the guy's eye and sets him on fire, or he like
Yeah.
throws someone out the window and they land on an icicle. Like that movie's like given me some like great laughs and some good times. Like you mentioned Jingle All the Way, it's like that's also a movie I watch every year. And like Jingle All the Way, like we may have gotten Arnold Schwarzenegger's single greatest line from that movie of his career.
Oh yeah. I think those are the movies I have to watch. And then some that I forgot about. I mean, some people would put Nightmare Before Christmas, but I feel like that's more of a Halloween movie. There's the Jingle All the Way 2 with Larry the Cable Guy. That's awful, but hilarious. And then Ernest Saves Christmas. Have you ever seen Ernest Saves Christmas?
No.
It's just as cursed. It's the same idea as like a Jingle All the Way. It's just this guy who's
Yeah.
basically retarded, saving Christmas any way he can. It's set around the same time as Home Alone. That's another movie. It's not highly rated. It's definitely not the best Christmas movie, but it's funny. It's a movie that you just shake your head at. So those are some of mine that I would shout.
Have you seen Arthur Christmas?
I don't think so.
That's a good movie. It has James McAvoy in it. It's essentially like this one kid like is left out on Thanksgiving, and I feel like on Christmas, and he forgets his present. Then he has to go find him, and it's an animated movie. But I feel like the coolest part about Christmas movies is kind of the different lore of Santa. Like how like the movie treats Santa, I feel like is always like an interesting take. And like, cause you have some movies where you get a Jack Santa, you have some movies where you get like more of the traditional one. Like you got Violent Night where Santa used to be a Viking in it. Elf is like the classic one, or like the Santa Claus kind of explaining how you become Santa. So I feel like that's kind of always been an interesting, part about Christmas movies. And then you just have like, I feel like more of the modern ones like are just kind of throwaways. Like you have like The Night Before with Seth Rogen, which was okay. Office Christmas Party, kind of another throwaway Christmas movie. And then you just have some of like the older ones that your parents make you watch, like It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'm 9. Why am I watching a movie about banking?
How about Polar Express? You want to talk about a movie that puts me to sleep? Polar Express puts me to sleep. I never have any interest in rewatching that movie. It's just not my jam.
I watched Polar Express once, and it was when I worked at a movie theater, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to watch this movie and like test it for the like movie theater, make sure it works before we play it?" Like, okay. And then I fell asleep like halfway through. I like couldn't make it through it, and then I just remember the kid on the train being really annoying, like the autistic kid.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie is overrated. I'm not a fan. But it seems like every year they just push it out and pump it out because they have to. But I'm not a fan.
Yeah,
But nonetheless,
that one, and then the Jim Carrey Grinch movie is one of those ones like I thought I liked when I was a kid, and then I rewatched it, and I'm like,
yes.
ah.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of that. And apparently they're making a new Grinch. Apparently they want to make a sequel to that. We'll see if that even comes into fruition. Jim Carrey doesn't really act anymore, except for in Sonic movies for some reason. But that's the only script he'll accept. But yeah, I don't know. Christmas movies are interesting.
Do you the great debate is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Not really. It's really not. It's just because the movie is set during Christmas time. It's an action movie. Now, yeah, and it's the same. I feel like it's not quite the same parallel, but I feel like Nightmare Before Christmas is more of a Halloween movie because it's more spooky.
Yeah.
I just feel like Die Hard, it's literally the last Christmas of movies. Like if Last Christmas was the song, then the movie would be Die Hard. Last Christmas is just a person that, if you listen to the song, it's just about hooking up with somebody on Christmas and then not seeing them again. In this movie, it's just action movie, but it just happens to be snowing, and that is why it's considered a Christmas movie. So therefore, I do not agree that it's a Christmas movie.
Yeah. I watched Carry On this weekend, the new Netflix movie with Taron Egerton and Jason Bateman. And honestly, it's impressive where Netflix finds these writers, because Netflix movies, like the writing is just like comically bad, and just some of like the logical errors that they make in this movie. I'm like, how did you get there? Like if it wasn't for Jason Bateman in this movie, I would have turned it off. But like I watched it just because of Jason Bateman, and he's a really good actor. But like the entire movie around him, I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't know how Netflix keeps doing this. Like another example of that, like they made like a road rage movie with Russell Crowe where like he gets cut up, he like doesn't go at a red light and a lady honks at him. So the rest of the movie is just Russell Crowe driving angrily following this lady around. And then she gets to a gas station and his truck is still there and he's like looking at her. And then the lady inside the gas station, she's like, "I saw it on the news. He's road raging." And like that's the level of writing these Netflix movies have. I'm like, how are you blowing hundreds of millions of dollars on this movie? Like understand how Netflix makes money off of like $14 a month subscriptions. Like, I guess you have the household, you're like a publicly traded stock that's done like pretty well, but like you're just throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I don't know how they get behind this because they spend billions and billions of dollars on new content, and a lot of it's garbage. And it sounds like this movie isn't that great either. But I, for a company that sells publicly and they have to announce their earnings, they're very secret about how they not only make money off of their movies, but also how they decide how many viewers watch this movie. Like, I don't know what they deem a successful movie on Netflix. They had like it just seems like they have that fucking cake show. Is it cake when the cake meme was popular? And it just seems like they greenlight everything. Like they have an endless
Yeah.
bankroll, it seems like.
Yeah, their first big show was House of Cards. How'd that turn out? And then you have Ozarks, which is a good show, but a lot of people didn't like the ending. And then you had Henry Cavill for The Witcher, and then you're like, well, there's a clause where Henry Cavill could leave if we don't, stick to the source material. So why would we want to force out a A-list actor like Henry Cavill on our show? Well, you know what? We're still gonna replace him with Liam Hemsworth anyways. Like, it's a stupid decision after pile of cash set on fire. Then you get these. You had like that movie with Ryan Reynolds and The Rock. It's like speaking of bad movies, like honestly, like Netflix deserves to be on the list we're gonna go over next, but like can we save a spot for Netflix in the off season of like top 5 worst movie
Things.
producers? Can we find a spot in the documents here for Netflix as one of the worst content creators ever?
We can make a worst top things list when the season is over. But let's talk about the worst of the worst in week 16, because there's a lot of teams that have just given up and they're basically just dead in the water. But here we are talking about football every week for the last several weeks. Worst top 5 according to Brickyard. Let's talk about teams that are not included. And you're going to see a theme with these teams not included. And you'll get why in a second here. Teams not included. The Giants, because they're tanking successfully. The Jaguars, because they're tanking successfully. The Titans, because you guessed it, they're tanking successfully. And last but not least, the Patriots. Can you guess why they're not on this list? Because they're tanking successfully. Let's start at number 5, a game that just transpired about an hour ago. How about the Guantanamo Bay Saints? 196 yards of offense, 0 points. They scored as many points as we did this night, this faithful December 3rd. For the Saints, every time I watch them on offense, I think, why is this legal? Why is it legal for us to watch the Saints on public television? It's not fair to my eyes. It's not fair to my self-esteem. It's not fair to my mental health to watch the Guantanamo Bay Saints. Therefore, they are at 5. At number 4, the Browns. More simply because we get Jameis Winston is benched for DTR needs CPR, a coined phrase by Mr. Marcus himself. And it's an automatic entry for that alone. The fact that you bench Jameis Winston for DTR, I understand you're tanking, and maybe you're tanking more successfully than others. But you get all the downsides of Jameis Winston, i.e. stupid plays and interceptions. But it's like Jameis Winston is playing with a broken arm. You could have just broken his arm and let him play, and you would have had DTR, basically. So the Browns, for the fact that you bench Jameis and the fact that you make us watch DTR, you therefore are going to be at number 4. Number 3, where are all my hunters at? Where's all this dead meat on the side of the road? Where are my hunters, i.e. Travis Hunters, potentially? The Chicago Bears. When I watch the Chicago Bears play, it's like I see a dead bear carcass on the ground, and we have the Lions who go and ravage them for meat. We see the Eagles strike down and strike them for all of their resources. Or maybe next week with the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football, ravaging what's essentially just a skeletal casket of the Bears at this point. The Bears are dead. Matt Eberflus is long gone. Ryan Poles will soon be gone, and at this point, Caleb Williams' confidence as well. So Bears continuously disappoint week in and week out. Therefore, they are number 3. Speaking of dead corpses, though, how about the ayahuasca king himself, Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets? The worst part is one of them is in Chicago and the other one is in New Jersey. Which is worse? Probably New Jersey. Dead corpses, the Jets muster up 9 points, and every time they even have a slither of hope, it comes crashing down with an Alan Lazard drop with Aaron Rodgers documentary. I watched part of it. Wasn't a fan. The Jets, they just find new ways to disappoint me. And now I have to watch this documentary for Aaron Rodgers. Not a fan. But I can negate all of that if I knew that everyone here had a plan. And this team I've been so good to all year long. And now it's time that they're included on this list. All year long, they've been unincluded because I'm like, you know what they're doing? They're tanking successfully. They're bad. They're like, we don't have a quarterback. We're going to pick up Gardner Minshew. We're going to keep Aiden O'Connell. We're going to pick up Desmond Ridder. And we're just going to keep losing and losing and losing because we want Shedeur Sanders. Well, guess what you did? You fucked it all up. You and your pride and your ego got in the way of something great. You guys could be looking at Shedeur Sanders, potentially the next great quarterback in the NFL. The Raiders, who, by the way, have not had a great quarterback ever, arguably. At least not since the fucking 80s with the LA Raiders. They've moved not once but twice since they've been good at quarterback. And with this win, you go from the number 1 overall pick, which could be Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, to now you're going to be drafting Jalen Monroe, which we've seen Alabama quarterbacks like Mac Jones, like Tua, like Jalen Hurts, who have all been okay, but not great, not franchise-changing in most cases in this team. And the Raiders team, like I said, have been so good. Their running game has been abysmal. Their passing game has been abysmal. Their defense has been abysmal. Everything about this Raiders team has been abysmal. And the worst part is that you're in fucking Vegas. Nobody lives in Vegas. Who the fuck actually goes to Raiders games? Everyone who's there are degenerate gamblers or they're hiring prostitutes, which would be better than watching this crap product that's on the Raiders field. Literally, the only 2 bright spots on this Raiders team at this point is the fact that they have Brock Bowers and Max Crosby. Max Crosby, he could be playing in Detroit next year, most likely. He might not even be on the Raiders. And then they just continually pile me on with disappointment. And this week was the biggest ego blow for me because I've been so good to them. They've been unincluded on so many lists. But this week, they made me look like a fool. And nobody makes Zach Jameson look like a fool. So therefore, the Raiders, you are now stapled for the rest of the year. Stapled to the worst top 5. You will not leave this list, especially if you keep winning games. Shame on the Raiders. Nobody makes a fool of Brick Jameson and gets away with it. Shame on
on you, Raiders. Yeah, I mean, somehow the Raiders, watching them win is worse than watching Aaron Rodgers high out of his mind talking about caterpillars.
Yeah, dude. That was rough. Did you watch
any
of that documentary?
I heard that a documentary was out and it's about Aaron doing psychedelics. Like, I had zero interest in watching it because I saw the picture of him and his eyes were closed and it's like, watch this, documentary of Aaron Rodgers doing drugs and talking about caterpillars, and then the picture of him, literally the 2 ends of his mustache look like 2 caterpillars talking to each other.
Yeah, I watched one episode and made me realize why people hate Aaron Rodgers. And I wouldn't say I'm an Aaron Rodgers hater necessarily, but I'm not an Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of him necessarily. And in this, I'm like, it just feels like he's talking out of his ass a little bit. He still brings up the COVID shit. Nobody cares about your COVID shit anymore, man. That happened 2 years ago. It's over. COVID's moved on. The pandemic's over. We don't care anymore. We get it. People were mad about your vaccination status. We don't care anymore. It's over. Get over it. Move on.
Yeah.
People were upset. But it's like you're just continuously rehashing this controversy that nobody cares about. Oh, you do drugs in the off-season. Yes, so does everybody else. There are other people that smoke weed and do drugs. Maybe it's not as publicized, but we don't care, man. Just do your thing and shut the fuck up. And better yet, retire. Just retire already. We don't care. At the worst, you're going to be a top 10 quarterback of all time. And at best, you're a top 5 quarterback of all time. We don't care anymore. You want to do drugs? Fuck. Next episode, do a line of fucking ketamine for all I care. We don't care.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Aaron Rodgers, just be you. Just do your thing. You're a millionaire.
That's such a great point. Like Aaron Rodgers discovers drugs. Okay. Like, oh,
I did the same thing in high
yeah,
school. That's awesome.
man. Suddenly, like, I started like doing this, and like, I had like, like an ego death. Like, really, I couldn't
You sound
tell.
like
Like, it was
yeah.
way more interesting listening to Derek Wolf on Joe Rogan talking about doing. I did a little bit of Adderall. I did a little bit of mushrooms. I did a little bit of Red Bull, and then fucking tried to move 300-pound humans out of the way while tripping on mushrooms. Is that what you're doing? Because Derek Derek Wolf's take on it was way more interesting. Like, yeah, I play football on mushrooms and Adderall. Like, tell me more. Not, man, like when you think of like a caterpillar, man, it's like so crazy. Like, it just sounds like he's like trying to be like deep. It just feels like he's looking for Facebook quotes that are gonna be on a home good thing in Marshalls. Like, think about the caterpillars, man. I could see it on a wall in someone's house right now.
Yeah. It's just why people hate him, man. Because he's gonna
Yeah.
put the not all who wander are lost. You're so deep, man. Who would have thought it's such a deep quote, man? Shut up. He's such a
Yeah, not
dork, man. He really is. And
yeah.
again,
Not
I don't
not
proclaim myself as a hater, but good lord, dude, just shut up. Just fucking do drugs and just stop trying to be what you're not, because you're clearly not what you
yeah.
say you are.
Yeah, and I've been realistic about Aaron Rodgers his entire career. Like, the whole the whole it was like the media's thing where they were the whole ones like the problem, and I think the thing that happened with Aaron Rodgers is he had Stephen A. Smith being like, he's the most talented thrower of the football ever. He had Shannon Sharp like smacking his gums on Undisputed, talking about how he was better than Brady. He had all these people like Aaron Rodgers is so great. Then as soon as COVID happened, the entire media flipped on him, and he hasn't gotten over it because while he was supposed to be the most talented thrower of the football ever, as soon as Patrick Mahomes came along, like the media flipped on him. He hasn't like he hasn't like recovered from it, and it seems like it's something that has bothered him. And like when you keep having to come out here and being like, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't bother me, but like if you're gonna say this, like the only thing I care about is like you state your vax status, like at some point it really feels like it bothers you, man, because if it didn't bother you, you wouldn't even mention the person's name there. It's like when a rapper's trying to like punch up, dig at another rapper, they're punching up at you. And when you're a big rapper, what you do, you punch up. You never really should punch down. It's like the problem that some people have with Eminem with like Kamikaze. It's like it seemed like he was just bullying and punching down at a lot of people, but like at some point, like when he would talk about like certain stuff doesn't bother me, like well, if you keep talking about it at some point, like seems like it bothers you, and it seems like you should deal with it, like and like doing drugs, sure, can it help open your mind, but like is it the end all be all to what's going to open up your life and like fix you? Like, no, you still have to do other things besides psychedelics.
So, I mean, if you want to watch it, I'll give you the Netflix login, but
No.
it's just him sucking his own dick the whole time.
Yeah, I don't even have time to watch stuff I want to watch or like play video games I want to do. Like I didn't even have time to watch like Hard Knocks or Receiver. Like, am I gonna watch Aaron Rodgers talk about like doing drugs? No. Like, do I have time to watch like detailed like every episode of that? Like, no. Like sometimes I don't even have time to watch the NBA. So am I gonna waste my time on Aaron Rodgers talking about caterpillars? Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's not worth it, man. It's lame. I watched 10 minutes. I turned it off. It was terrible.
Really? What was like the opening line?
It was just him coming off. It was him talking to RFK, and
Okay.
then him recovering from his injury from the Jets. And then he's just talking about his recovery process, and he's aiding his Achilles tear. And he's in this fucking some place in like South America doing ayahuasca in this like tribe thing. He's like just talking about his ego death as he's inflating his ego. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he just rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, and I get it. I'm not like a huge like hater of him. Like all of this comes from like someone who's like been more reasonable than most about Aaron Rodgers. But if you're gonna open up your show and it's like Aaron Rodgers talking, then suddenly like Aaron, I agree with you about what you did, and you took a stand for what you believe in, and like that's how you're gonna open the show.
That's fine.
Hummels.
Yeah. But nonetheless, this episode we talked about the Week 16. We've recapped everything. Talked about the future games that we'll have. We'll be back later this week after the holidays to cover it all. Hope everyone has a good holiday overall.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. We will be back here. NFL is taking over the NBA because the NFL is king on Netflix. Don't be like the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. If you are the NFL on Netflix, what you will do is most importantly, stay brick.
Stay brick.